Welcome to the B2B Category Creators Podcast, hosted by Gil Alouche, founder and CEO of Metadata.io. This podcast is all about sharing the real and sometimes uncomfortable secrets of category creation in the B2B software space. On this week's episode, we have Paul Sebastien, CMO of OffSec, the world's fastest growing cybersecurity company and creator of the #1 cybersecurity OS, Kali Linux, and Dan Frohnen, CMO at Upkeep, top-rated software designed to revolutionize maintenance and asset management.
Happy Friday, everyone. My name is Gil Alouche. I'm the founder and CEO of Metadata, and this is episode, I think, 15 of Category Creators. I'm excited to have with me Dan and Paul. Paul, maybe we start with you. Can you give a quick kind of introduction on yourself?
Sure. Well, I don't know about quick, but I'll do my best. I'm CMO and GM, straddling the CMO and GM world for a long time at companies like Udemy and Panelists acquired by Disney, and most recently in the cybersecurity space at OffSec.
Wonderful.
There, it could be a lot longer, but I'll pause.
Super quick. No, it is good. That's awesome. Dan, you're next.
Great to be here. So Dan Frohnen, I'm currently CMO over at a company called Upkeep. And prior to that, I've really been doing a lot of demand gen and CMO gigs at companies like Aptus, Schedulo, most recently over at Sendoso, and having a blast doing what I'm doing now.
Very cool. Again, I'm very excited to have you both. You know, when I started this not that long ago, the idea was it came from a webinar I was about to do about category creation, mostly because I'm trying to create a category and I have no idea what I'm doing. So I wanted to talk to smart folks like you, and I think it was Manny Medina who told me, you know, just do a podcast. Everyone that does a podcast today, just do a podcast is the thing. So I, converted it into a podcast, and fast forward a few episodes, became a thing of its own. And so we're going to spend some time on category creation, but I also want to ask you maybe something before we get into that. Can you share from your career, a moment that you feel was your biggest win? Your biggest win doesn't have to be your existing company, but a moment that you feel was a really big win for you as a professional, working in SaaS, working in startups. Maybe something that other people don't know, not something obvious like an IPO, but a moment of success. Dan, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, no, there's probably a couple of moments. I think the most recent moment was over at Sendoso during the pandemic, and it was really just taking this pretty big marketing mix that we had. We had just taken our Series B. We're putting a lot of chips on the table, as they say, in physical events, and we quickly had to pivot out of physical into digital. And I think to your point around category creation, a lot of that was creating a movement with our audience and really choosing what everyone's common pain point was and how we could help solve it along with our partners. And we were really able to rally quite a few co-brands to create that ecosystem, and then a lot of marketers and sellers to be with us on that journey and create a community. So big win. We're able to hit our metrics, of course, which makes it even better. But yeah, that was probably one of my most recent wins that I really look back on very fondly.
Super cool. I love that you brought it from a time of adversity. You brought a really big win moment. It's always really nice to hear. Paul, what about you? Do you have any
First, I want to give Dan some props actually on what he did at Sendoso. I think it's really impressive how he executed. I actually got to meet Dan while he was at Sendoso and did a little bit of advisory there too. And it is very, very impressive. And I think on the topic of category creation, I give Dan a lot of props for that. So well done, Dan. Very cool.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's well earned. For me, I mean, I'll just start with a lot of gratitude. I know it sounds cheesy, but I really mean it. I feel very lucky to have been part of some great things. I think I've been through 4 acquisitions in my career. And that's both really good and also very disruptive personally, because if you end up not staying on at the acquiring company because of location or whatever, it's, challenging. One of the things that comes to mind to me that maybe is sort of less obvious even I think with people that I worked with. But at Udemy, for me, Udemy, going in there, and basically being effectively the first hire sort of as a GM in what was a very nascent kind of idea for a B2B SaaS subscription offering in an existing consumer transactional marketplace model, was absolutely terrifying, right? So I was very lucky on a couple levels to meet or to have a couple early team members there that not only were just very creative and very flexible and just great to work with and very welcoming. The CEO at the time as well just kind of, I think, gave me a lot of leeway and patience really to figure out the go-to-market. And it's like, how the hell do you take an existing purely transactional business model that's also a two-sided marketplace, right? So they don't even own the content, but how do you then package it up and make effectively a SaaS subscription B2B offering for companies from that, right? Given that intrinsic, two-sided marketplace model. And then further, the market space was so crowded with incumbents, both large and small. And so how do you, take this existing brand that's known for one thing, extend it into B2B? It's the same company name, but how do you make a B2B division? How do you go to market in a way that is differentiated and sharp and pointed, can get traction in a space that's already crowded? So all those challenges at once, I think, were really tough, and it was a thorny intellectual problem. I mean, I call this sort of a 4 Ps problem, really. It's sort of like, how do you figure out your unique pricing, place, differentiation in that world? And for me, thinking about that, and again, working with some great people, coming up with a model that resulted in this unique hill that we figure out that we think we could double down on and own. For me, coming up with that, testing it, getting some early traction on it, and validating that we had something unique and differentiated, because we had everything else against us at the time, including tiny budget, all of that. And to have that start working was, for me, so satisfying and so rewarding. And I just take a lot of personal pride in that. And I just feel like it was a great moment in the power of just positioning and differentiation and going to the core principles of business. What unique hill can you own? How are you delighting customers in a unique and better way? How do you stand out from the competition, and how do you articulate that in a very sharp, differentiated way in a crowded space? I love that stuff, and in every role I've done since then, in particular, I keep kind of drawing from that experience. So for me, that was a personal win.
Nice. You use the word thorny. So both of you definitely are picking up big success from tough times. I think that's the theme. I think we talked about it last episode as well. That's cool. Thanks for sharing. When you think about times in your career where you grew the most, would you agree that was always comes together with a very painful time as well, or not necessarily?
For me, always, absolutely. The hardest times, not just in work, but in life, actually, going through adversity in life, whether it's a divorce or some big life change, your parents passing away, or sometimes all those things hitting at the same time, as was the case in my case, and a tough job situation. Those are the times actually where it's so painful and so visceral, but you really learn the most. At least for me, that's when I've grown the most, is when I'm outside my comfort zone. Yeah.
Love that. Cheers to that.
Yeah.
Learning the most outside of.
Are we gonna drink now? All right.
Absolutely.
Cheers for special times.
For special times, sometimes tough. Dan, what about you? Do you also have that correlation between tough times and growth times?
Yeah, definitely tough times. And I think the definition of tough times is sometimes it's not even adversity, right? It's you sometimes you get a fork in the road, and one path is super easy, it's familiar for you, and the other is, I've never done that, or that seems really scary, but I'm going to go down that path. It's going to be very painful. There's going to be trials and tribulations, but then you just come out of the other side as a superhuman with a new strength, right? And I think some of the best people that I've seen that take that path, they still, on the very top, they look very cool, calm, and collective, and they're figuring it out, and they're leveraging their networks and listening to podcasts and just doing everything they can to get there. And that's probably more of the paths that I've taken, but definitely agree with Paul. Like nothing nothing that you achieve is even worth achieving unless there's not some sort of pain associated.
That's a big one. I love that. It's a little masochistic, like, self-harming when you say those things, but it is the truth. I definitely found it as a pattern, especially people come on this podcast, that there's a correlation between adversity and pain and growth. Yeah, it's very interesting to see that the way people like you, for example, Dan or Paul, think about adversity is from a completely different point of view. That some think about it, some think about adversity as like a misfortune, something that to be avoided, or if there are two decisions, one of them is easy. It's just why do you keep talking? Just like that's
a
the one to
great
take.
point. That's a great point. I think Dan can speak to this as well, perhaps even your most recent move, Dan. But yeah, I mean, I get a strange, perverse pleasure in putting myself into ridiculously uncomfortable new situations, including my most recent. I mean, I dove into this cybersecurity space, which is quite possibly just the most sort of inside baseball, complex, rarefied, strange little world. Again, also completely terrifying, but I actually love doing that because you grow a lot, and then when you put yourself into a lot of these disparate situations, you over time can start to connect the dots, and connecting the dots, I think, laterally is, for me, has been one of the biggest benefits of working in a lot of different spaces and not kind of coming up through a very linear path. If I just come up through a linear marketing path and the same types of companies the entire time, I don't think I would have had the career experience I've had, and I don't think I would have experienced just a lot of the sort of highs and I think dimensional life-changing experiences I've had. So I think I love doing disparate things and connecting the dots and finding the commonalities, the parallels, and figuring out how to leverage those things. And you find so many of these things are actually the same. So you do find a lot of pattern recognition between experiences, even in completely disparate spaces. So that's been a real insight.
Yeah, I'd say for those that are listening, that's actually what Paul just gave you as a growth hack to your career. A lot of people, they see situations and they actually kind of shy away from it. But if you're just jumping into the situation, knowing that you have the support of whoever's asking you to get into that situation, and you do your best, you're going to learn a new situation. You're going to have pattern recognition. And then all those patterns actually make you just able to handle more and more and more and more with, we all have the same 24 hours in our day, right? It's all it really is. That's the great.
Right on. That's right on, yeah.
Love that. You seem like a well-rounded person. Sounds like professionally for sure, Paul. But I also I think I see on one end I see two guitars, and on the other end I think I see the baby university. I think that's how they call it.
Busted, yes. That's this sort of strange dichotomy that I live in here. Baby time versus music time versus career job stuff. Yeah, exactly. I could go into that, but yeah.
That's the beauty. I think that's the beauty in life. I would definitely want to get back into that in a second. You talked a little bit about growth. Let's see if we can correlate that to category creation. How do you see the component or the idea, the concept of category creation within the bigger paradigm of company growth or startup growth? Whoever wants to start.
Dan, you want to start with that one?
Sure, happy to. I mean, I think category creation is such a polarizing topic. I'll say there's this whole school of thought that you need to go and create a net new category and create the movement around it. And then there's kind of another school of thought, and I'm probably more on that school of thought, where really for the most part, nothing in business is truly new anymore. It's more of taking disparate ideas and actually making it something new. There's obvious exceptions, but when I think about category and the reason that you would do it for your company, it's really because, and Paul kind of talked about this when he was introducing himself, it's you're taking a concept and you're choosing the hill that you're going to occupy, and you're creating the movement around which you're going to rally the people that care the most deeply about the problem that you're solving, so that you can differentiate from the pack. And that's really at its core fundamental. That's all it really is. And I think it's I think it's important for every company to have some sort of unique differentiator. They need to stand for something beyond a generic category name, and they need to stand for something beyond making money. And that's really where category comes in. Is it's a movement that should bind your company, your customers, and your employees.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Dan, I also think that's such a great practical way of looking at it as well, because that's the truth. That's the reality of it. And I think, Gil, on one of your past episodes, you had Rob Henshaw from Cameo on there, and he said the same thing, really, that, look, these things, if we're honest with ourselves, are not actually new, right? We're doing our best to delight customers and making the newness and the differentiation around those things unique, and effectively, can it be considered a new category? Are you creating something truly new that solves their pain or their delight in some way? That's really what matters there. It's probably not entirely new. I think sometimes also of the analog that Peter Thiel uses, I think from his 0 to 1 book, the idea of trying to create a category of one, where effectively competition is for losers, right? I really resonate with that a lot. It's really hard to do, right? It's extremely hard to do to create a new category. On the surface, intellectually, it's possible to think of many new categories or spins on things. But where the rubber meets the road is, how are you finding a product market fit, creating something where there's an actual customer need, again, a pain you're solving or a delight or aspiration that you're enabling around that new category. And, so many ideas have been tried and done at varying degrees of execution. So sometimes what you find is there's just been great ideas out there, great entirely, new categories where there is very little competition, because maybe they haven't thought about it in the right way, or they haven't executed well as a result of that, or the technology wasn't there yet. Sort of that mix of technology and culture hadn't caught up to that point. So, for example, could something like an Instagram exist prior to iPhone? Of course not, right? So there are things that are enabled by technology that are probably the biggest vectors that produce new potential categories to be created. And so I think along every technological point in the sort of Moore's law evolution of technology, you have new categories made possible by not just one technology, but by the convergence, right? By the application of multiple disparate spaces into one new packaged offering. The iPhone moment was, of course, one of those, right? And there are many others. So to me, that's where there a lot of the true new categories of one that Thiel talks about are enabled, is by new technology vectors producing new technological capabilities that are coupled with sort of consumer or business services from other disciplines that result in a net new kind of category. And again, you see this again and again and again. So that's what I try to look for. Again, it's hard to do, especially if you're in an existing company. You're like, how can I create a new category? You're sort of working within the confines a bit of the playing field that you're in. But I do think that, for example, you can use the one thing that is changing, that is in your power, and that is new technology. So let's just take VR as an example. VR is a much lamented example right now, but let's just say something like VR that is emergent and relatively new in terms of the consumerization, something like that, not actually VR probably, but something like that. You could say, okay, how can my existing company leverage something new in this new medium that is growing and nascent or possible? How could we maybe combine that with something else we're doing to create a net new experience or service on top of our core value prop, right? So I think there's sort of these extensions like that are enabled by new technologies, coupled with your existing value prop that can produce new categories.
You both talked about like, first of all, it sounds like it's almost, you start with the idea of, I want to create a category because of whatever reason I was told, or I read this book, or it's a cool thing to do, or I'm going to be on a podcast, so I better know something about it. but sometimes maybe it's what I hear is that sometimes maybe it starts from the wrong place. Like, are you creating, like, truly, are you creating a category? If either you've been in a situation where you joined a startup, you joined or created, or I've been in a situation where you're at the early stage, sure, there is product market fit, and you've been asked to create a category, and you go through and you think, I'm not going to create a category. It's not the best move for this company. It's going to be just a shit show, like a bad, a big strategic initiative to the wrong direction, or something of that sense. Have you been in that situation and did some analysis to see, are you extension category, or are you completely new, figured out you're more of an extension and took back a few steps? Did that happen?
I have been in that situation, and I always look at like, okay, what category are we trying to claim we are, but then what category are we truly a part of? And usually my strategy there is either it's two things. One is, okay, we can go ahead and coin this new category to differentiate ourselves, but then I'm still going to be trying to be as relevant as I can for people that are looking in the existing categories where I show up. Or the second strategy is become an aggregator of categories and say, I think Paul brought up an interesting point that I could extend on, is a lot of new categories are actually just bringing together different technologies that could be part of a business process that makes a ton of sense to bring together, right? So you could also look at it from an aggregation and tell the story. If you have capabilities in 2 or 3 different categories, you extend that way. But I do think that those are the situations that I've been in where I've kind of circumvented the proverbial shit show of a category that might not make sense. Because I think, as we all know, depending on what market you're in, if either the analysts are going to tell you what your category is, if those people matter, or people aren't really going to care if the analysts don't care, because they're looking for you how they're going to look for you, and you really need to optimize for that. So I think it's got to be in the middle.
You said a few things that require follow-up. First of all, you were a little vague about that experience. Can you share about that experience that you had personally, or is it too soon?
No, not happy to. It's at Schedula, we had a situation like that where we had field service management capabilities, and we had workforce management capabilities, but we fundamentally believed as a company that field service management was optimizing for the wrong thing, and we were more optimizing for the mobile workforce. So we went out with mobile workforce management, but in that world, the analysts saw mobile workforce management as an extension of field service management. So we were already at a disadvantage trying to flip that understanding up against some really big incumbent solutions in the market. So the strategy was, we're mobile workforce management, it's differentiated, but we also need to show up in field service, and we need to show up in workforce management. And that's still the strategy that they're employing today with the deskless workforce. I mean, they just raised $70 million from SoftBank yesterday for their Series C. So congrats, Matt.
Sounds good. When you decided, or when you found out that, hey, maybe it's part of the larger category, did you get pushback? Was there an intent or interest to try to do it anyway, or did you start making moves and saw the red flags, or how did that pan out? Because I know that's something that is not popular. Talking about tough decisions, sometimes you put an idea in your head, like Sendoso, for example, thought about category creation from day one. The day they raised their seed, there was the intent to create a category. So did you have to kind of figure out some of that?
I mean, it's interesting because at Schedulo, the CEO was just adamant that we are different, right? And he had that vision. And I remember when I first started, we were going through what I'm sure Paul's been through a million times. You're on a whiteboard for a couple of days trying to pull out all of the secret sauce that is in this mad scientist's mind, because they're building this thing, right?
Oh,
and, yep. And as we're unpacking it, I was convinced after like these sessions, I'm like, okay, this is different than field service management, and here's why. But it's definitely something he had to take me on the journey of. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been an effective marketer for him, right? I needed to truly believe and buy into it as well. So I would think that whether it's the founder telling you that you need to do category creation, or in my case at Upkeep right now, I'm about to reposition a little bit and do some of that. Either way, there's going to be some convincing from one side, if that's going to be a healthy relationship, and if that's going to be a successful endeavor in the market.
Let's change gears for a second. First of all, let's have a drink. I'm gonna have to pour myself a little bit.
Cheers.
Salud.
Cheers, gentlemen. When you think about, you've done this quite a few times, both of you, in well-known growth startup for acquisitions. Paul, you mentioned. What is an absolute truth that you read about in, like the tech publishers on LinkedIn, people post it about all the time, or something that you hear in one of those tech conferences that we used to go to? Maybe it's coming back, like SaaStr, that is a complete bullshit, that you've heard it like 5 times and you're like, no, I've been there like more than once. I know for a fact this is not true. It's a nice story, definitely not true. Kind of like when you see the overnight success in TechCrunch, that people think like, oh my God, this huge round of funding, it's amazing. They just did it in 2 months, and they don't know there's like a convertible note from the previous year, that the valuation is like, is different, so on and so forth. So, yeah, maybe you can start, Paul. Get us started.
I don't have anything specific. I mean, there's a lot of things that bother me, if I'm totally honest, that you see on LinkedIn in particular. I mean, a lot of it, look, I mean, for many of us, I think it's kind of painful sometimes to open up LinkedIn anyway, because so much of it is just posturing. And it's like, if you're not posting a lot, you feel like somehow you're not part of the thing. Of course, the reality is, no, maybe you're actually working and making real traction. And you're simply just not talking about it or bragging about it. And then it really becomes a means to an end, and one of your promotion channels. One of the things that I still think that brand and word of mouth are underappreciated, just shockingly so, still in this this over quantification of everything, which actually is actually the right thing to do, but sometimes they do it in lieu of the power of attributing growth and success through proxy measures, right? And measures that are sometimes softer measures, or measures that you don't get a number from measuring. There's so many great examples of brands that get so much affinity and attach from the number of touches that you can't count, right? So if you think you're counting touches, it takes 12 touches. We've calculated to, get a conversion. It's like, is it really 12? No, of course, it's probably a lot more than that. It's all the touches you can't count that can be attributed to brand, word of mouth, and frankly, just a whole lot of cause and effect out there that is so indirectly measurable through proxy only, that until we get to a point where we have such a massive data set that we can truly factor in everything, which of course is like this asymptotic goal, I think this over-reliance on only the channels you can measure, and the pressure now that CMOs get in particular to quantify everything, ends up being the case where the CFO and the CEO often they're put in a position where they're trying to effectively cover their hides, right? And so they're forced to rely on only quantitative measures that you can directly measure and attribute. And I think just because of the changes in the operating model, especially in venture-backed companies, there just isn't any room for anything attributable directly. So I just think that's a long-winded way of saying, brand, word of mouth, and some of the intangibles and the softer measures, I just think are still among the most powerful in the world. There's great examples of that. The best brands of all time, I think Apple, et cetera, et cetera. So that always bothers me. People who in such a linear, rote, myopic way that they look like this. It's like a flashlight in the dark, and you're looking at one little part of the brush and the road in front of you, and you don't realize what is just beyond that, simply because you can't yet see it. I think of the great Carl Sagan quote, is just because we haven't yet found evidence of something doesn't mean it is not evidence that the thing does not exist, right? Of course, you can use that in the inverse, and you can actually make crazy outlandish claims by using that same that same axiom, but
maybe that's okay.
You get the point, right? You get the point.
Yeah, it's a good point. So branding matters in B2B, matters in startups. That is very quantitative. It was a long answer, so you have to finish your drink. Cheers. It was very insightful.
I'll be punished for my sins of
for your insight.
And Gil's pretty hardcore on this.
I'm just trying to drink, and I don't want to be by myself, so I'm going to make up.
Thank God it's good wine, actually. Thank you. It's very, very good wine.
I think it was so interesting though, because what you said is something that is completely true. Like you, I don't know how personal it was for you, but I think many marketers share that that stance that branding is significantly underutilized in the tech world, because unfortunately tech world have lots of engineers like me that have a hard time just like making the left brain hemisphere see the value in it until we grow up, and then we see the value in it. I think it takes some time. You have to go through some experiences to see the value, and it may not be in your dashboard right away, not in a way that you're accustomed to your point. But I do think
what's really, really important though to know is the opposite of that is maybe where marketing sort of came out of and actually has a very fair, I think, criticism against it, where you had this sort of former sort of model of a CMO who is this sort of brand centric person levitating on a purple carpet,
like a Don Draper.
Like, no, it's all going to work out, man, kind of thing. So that doesn't work either. And I've never been more quantitative in my role than I have in recent years. In fact, literally every month, it's like I literally want to measure everything, and I actually want to get even better and bigger data sets, do even more sophisticated analysis on how things are working. So let me be very, very clear about the importance of that.
Absolutely.
But still at that, there is still so much you simply just can't measure yet, right? I think actually predictive analytics and AI actually will be helpful here on the extrapolation front. I know, Gil, it's something that you've done a lot of speaking about as well. So I think you're onto a very, very important area for helping address this problem that I'm talking about, to simply get more data and get better data, including predictive data going forward.
I think it's a very important point, because it's the ultimate combo between the right brain, the left brain. There is the Don Draper that walks around with a few slides and convinces everyone about their idea, and by doing that, he sometimes creates a reality that makes what was impossible possible. It may look very expensive because you have to spend 5 million immediately, but it might not be as expensive if you were to do it with a trial and error, quantitative A/B testing approach, which would take you there in just a different path. Anyway, so I think there is definitely something to it, and I think combining the quantitative, multi-vat experimentation approach with taking a full blow and trying to just hit hard one time with a big bet, there is space for both. I think that you sometimes cannot make exponential growth without the one or the other, but you also can't be predictable and stable without the other. So super cool. Dan, I saw you unmuting. Do you have an opinion on that, or do you want to add something on your own?
I do have I've got one that I'd add, which kind of dovetails into what Paul was saying. The thing that I think irks me the most is when people are out touting like the playbook for this or the playbook for that. And I think particularly in startups, it's so important to come in with a beginner's mind and look at the unique situation, the customer, the existing team, and really understand what intrinsically makes that situation unique and try to build it in a unique way. And if you're a CMO, obviously you have a million different plays, right? But don't build the playbook for the last company. Take some of your plays and put them in, learn some new plays and build it that way. So I can't stand it when someone tries to sell me a playbook. It just goes against everything I believe in.
I need a drink to that, because Dan, that's such a better point and better topic than the one that I brought up. I think that bugs the crap out of me too. And frankly, you're the only other CMO I've heard actually make that point. I agree with you 1,000%, and it bugs the hell out of me too. People think that there is literally a playbook that you can apply, to the same, to companies across the the very, very different journeys and teams, and I mean, there's commonalities and there's dots that you can connect.
Totally.
But taking a rote playbook approach, let's just say that I've lived that in my career, where someone else really had a strong belief in playbooks, and yeah, I mean, it was a total disaster.
Yep.
And it's just caused a lot of pain, and also all of the processes that fall out of that in that playbook. We do it this way, and you've got to do it this way, and the terms we're going to use are this and this and this. Even getting really rote and sort of pedantic about that is just is painful. Every case is different. Every single situation is different, even in the same space. If I were to go to a different cybersecurity company, right, would I apply the same techniques? Oh my God! I mean, look at the team. Look at the unique, attributes of the space. The pain you're solving in that company could seem similar on the outset, but actually be completely different.
Yep.
So I love, Dan, that you've taken that approach, and I think that speaks to why you've done well.
Preach it. Let's cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
Cheers, gentlemen. I think it's interesting how the more experienced people that you speak with, the more of a beginner's mind and humble approach that they have. And the least, like when you're younger or just starting out and had one win, you sometimes have the misconception of this is the way, like it's basically, I figured it out. This is this formula. I'm just gonna rinse and repeat. And of course, that's not the way. I mean, by definition, a startup is doing something different, some innovative approach. So wonderful. Let's change gears again, and talk about something that was maybe you can choose if it was your biggest, but definitely something that was top 3 of your #fail moments as a CMO. Something that you just fucked it up completely, and you just walk up in the middle of the night or the next morning, you're like, fuck, I did this. It was not good.
Dan on the spot here. Dan, anything that comes to your mind? Maybe
I'll just give you a tactical one, right? I was at a company that I won't name, and we were pivoting from the Salesforce ecosystem to the Microsoft ecosystem. And as you can imagine, our entire database was really predicated on Salesforce and Salesforce customers. And as we were building our relationship with Microsoft, we decided to do like some sort of joint go-to-market campaign with them. And we sent an email out that was all Salesforce specific, the footer, the whole nine, out to all of these Microsoft people, and it almost damaged the relationship to like the point of terminal, and that got all the way to the very top. So from a tactical standpoint, that was a big screw up. Not sure if I could learn any lessons on that one other than double check your segmentation in your database.
Oh man, that's a tough one. I can imagine the conversation with the CMO, CEO. That's a classic marketing ops fluke, but a big one. So nice. That's a good share. Thank you.
It happens to all of us.
On the same lines, in some ways less of a direct sort of CMO kind of work, thing like that, but related very, very much. My brother, Nick, and I have a very surreal sense of humor and a relationship that goes back to our childhood around very surreal humor. Okay, just very, very strange surreal humor. Something we started, that we started as kids that we continue to this day. We'll send each other, with our iPhones. Of course, you can hold down and do a little voice snippet, right? And you can text it to yourself. So sometimes I will send my brother Nick at, late at night, sometimes after a glass or two of wine, something very, very surreal, sometimes just completely inappropriate and very strange. That's part of our sort of ongoing multi-year humorous thread. Well, I actually did that one time to a customer, and actually didn't do it just one time, happened a couple different times. It also happened one time I sent one to a team member of mine, actually, who was on my team reporting to me. And then also I did that similarly. It was actually a written text to my CEO. So these are all, imagine these all being very strange kind of humor, just out of context. Just imagine, you're someone working for me on my team, for example, and you get just the most absurd, voice snippet from me, from my phone number, and it's from me. And you're just like, what the hell? what the hell's going on? Imagine a customer getting that. I've been very lucky to have recovered from those totally embarrassing situations by literally just being brutally honest and saying, I'm so sorry. My brother Nick and I had this really weird humor thing going way back to our childhood. I'm not going to explain it further, but that's what happened. And they were extremely understanding every single time. But oh my God, it could have been really, 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 really bad, right?
Oh man, that sounds like sounds like I want to sign up and see those weird, surreal.
So we've actually thought about some of them, we'll do different voices and things like that as well, characters from movies, from, whatever, as part of that. So we thought about, is there potential, sort of surreal humor market, much like an Onion kind of thing, but for this kind of thing. We've actually thought about doing something with it at one point, because we such a large body of work at this point, right?
Absolutely.
But it's definitely gotten me in trouble. Again, everyone's been very, very accommodating.
Hey,
but there's been also
thanks for sharing.
Work screw ups too. Mail sent to customers, certainly. Newsletters that have gone out where I should have checked something and something changed the last minute and I didn't get a chance to approve it. And it's something that literally, like our CEO, and I talked about not putting out there, and sure enough, it comes out. Like just completely, embarrassing stuff like that. That just happens.
Well, put me on the list for recipients who are getting texts they're not supposed to get. That sounds like the best gift.
Yeah.
You did remind me, Paul, with your word surreal, that you did mention that you had some surreal experiences, both personally and professionally, during your career. And so I think this is the magical moment to get back to it. When you were saying that, what were you thinking about?
I don't know if it was anything in particular, but
there was definitely something in particular, because I asked you at that moment and you said, yeah.
One of the benefits of being 1,000 years old, like I am, where like I'm actually older than Yoda, or Bilbo Baggins with the ring and all that stuff. One of those benefits is I was around during the .com 1.0 here in the Valley, right? So right at the dawn of it in '95, co-founding a company. I both good surreal, like I found myself in meetings back then in '95, right at the dawn of the web, with Mark Andreessen and Jim Barksdale and Jim Clark and Thomas Dolby, who was my co-founder at the time, doing this interactive audio startup for the web, like back during these sort of halcyon days, right, of the .com 1.0.
Sounds amazing.
Really, really, really good surreal and memories and things, and just seeing Mark Andreessen at that early stage as a kid, basically in that context. Just really, really cool stuff like that that I got to experience back then. But also the other side of the surreal, some of the .com 1.0 sort of parties and work trips where you heard that that some high executive was, doing something inappropriate with someone maybe on your own team, that kind of stuff, just really, crazy stuff like that you realize is actually not so crazy. And when you see that kind of stuff continue, even into the kind of current day in the Valley, you realize that tech has changed a lot since the 1.0 days, but there's still just a lot of weird stuff that happens, right? But also, I think really good, healthy, surreal stuff, like being part of working with just amazing visionary people and getting to partake in discussions and conceiving the future, and then being part of building that. That's sort of the awesome side of surreal. I also, for me, I'm weird in that I had a very strange background. I actually had a music career, believe it or not, in the early 90s, to even further date myself. So, I had a band that had 15 minutes of fame with the MTV video and a couple hit singles and things like that. So, I had that experience. That was also very, very surreal. And to kind of come out of that and some of those from that world and get sort of, I would say, disenchanted with the horrible music world, especially at the time, and go into tech and go into the heart of sort of then the .com kind of 1.0. That was really, really exciting, because it literally was sort of the merging in some ways of what was possible then through early technology in the mid 90s, and the fusing of how do we combine media, so things like music and video, right, with tech at that time in a low bandwidth context. That was sort of the foundation of this company, Beatnik, that I co-founded with Thomas Dolby. And I think that was such a wild west, and the feeling in the Valley then, and the types of characters you encountered in the Valley then couldn't be more different than today. And I don't want to sound like some old guy who sort of laments, oh, it was so great back then. But the tech world now and Silicon Valley now just bears almost no resemblance to the sort of wide-eyed, really exciting, really, I think, kind of healthy Wild West that existed back then. And there's still yet, it's paradoxical because there's more exciting stuff happening than ever before now. And the convergence of multiple different technologies and the realization of all things that we've only dreamed about back then are real now. But I think that the mindset, the kind of the cultural ethos around what's possible through technology now, through the generation that has come up being born with it, is fundamentally different. And I really feel like we've lost something. I feel that we don't have the same true kind of wide-eyed, big, long-term, exciting vision that anything is possible like we used to have. And it really is so much more focused on monetization, exits, and sort of the materialistic sort of tangibles of that than the sort of revolutionary stuff. So I'll stop ranting, but that's something that, again, the one benefit of being 1,000 years old is connecting the dots between now and then, and seeing that stark difference.
Sounds like you missed the old Burning Man days of
No,
Silicon Valley.
it's not that either. It's definitely not a Burning Man type of thing either.
No.
It's not the, hey man.
No, I think I simplified it too much. Forgive me.
No,
I think
no. Yeah.
I think you're talking about the days in which money was not as big of a component in innovation, and you could just go wild. And really, that's what I meant. So I think I share. I share the. I wasn't there. I wish I was. I think it sounds amazing.
You weren't even born yet, Gil.
I was born, but I was pretty young, like a young child in my hometown. Unfortunately, I didn't have access to the valley, but I guess I should have. But it sounds like a magical time when you guys got started, or everyone got started, and there was less of a structure and commercialism being put on that. But look, a lot of the reality, like you said, a lot of the reality that we live in today is thanks to that wild innovation that maybe wouldn't be here otherwise.
Yeah, and I think things like blockchain and crypto are an example of some of the most, it truly would, to me, the closest thing to feel, it feels like the Wild West that existed back then, and the most fertile potential change that can ripple through every little tiny facet of society over time. I do see that with blockchain and crypto.
Can we bring some of that magical environment back, in your opinion?
What's that? Sorry.
Should we, and how can we bring some of that environment back to startups and innovation?
Boy,
even if it's not just the Valley,
Yeah, no, I think there's multiple things. I think that actually the Valley, there's been a bit of an exodus starting a bit. People like yourself in Miami and other places. Not that there's a greener grass per se. We're gonna say, oh yeah, it's in Austin or Miami. It's less about location now. Really, what's exciting is decentralization in general, and I mean that with a capital D. So global, the idea now that finally. And the pandemic really sort of accelerated this, finally made this sort of real and practical. You can truly be anywhere in the world and be working together, at full clip with completely decentralized teams. And I think this is part of the blockchain movement and also the shift to more and more remote work. So I think that that's really, really exciting. I think that Silicon Valley it ends up unfortunately breathing a lot of its own exhaust, and so there's a lot of things and sort of norms, and the playbook-itis. I think, to kind of quote Dan a little bit about the playbook thing, too many playbooks, too many this it's so well trodden now, the path to VCs and getting the attention of the top tier VCs versus the lower ones. And so that entire playbook and all the sort of smarminess that goes into it, back in the day. You didn't have the city and the area just rife with just tech bros and broettes everywhere. And I hate to paint just a stark cultural picture, but there's a lot of homogenized thinking and just a lot of cultural things and a lot of sort of movements that have all converged that I think make it for the antithesis of an open environment for radical ideas. I think, unfortunately, ideas now become quickly politicized, and that you attach a cultural stigma to. And if it doesn't fit into your unique tribe or trope, you're immediately labeled and you're put into something. And I'm not talking about right-wing or left-wing politics at all, actually. I think actually, unfortunately, you've just had such a factionalization of people and culture and processes. And so unlike the Wild West sort of days, now the sort of well-trodden, overly well-trodden, and the norms and all the stuff that goes with it, including a lot of the political stuff and the cultural stuff, makes for an environment where I don't see a lot of innovation kind of happening from here. And I think what we're seeing is in things like blockchain, the innovation is not happening here. It's happening elsewhere. In fact, it's happening in other countries and places. And I think, the US in general has also been very, generally incredibly slow to embrace crypto. There are a lot of challenges around that, and rightly so in some cases. But crypto is the one thing, I think blockchain generally is one of the few areas I think that has the potential to completely transform the entire VC and company funding model on its head, to how people are empowered and capitalized to do what they want to do, to even how people just get compensated and actually derive meaning from their work. It has that one potential, that it can cut like a heat-seeking missile through a lot of those things over time. And I think it will actually happen no matter what. And I think that's going to have profound changes on places like the Valley and also cities in general. I think the role and the purpose of cities is going to radically change. And unfortunately, for many cities, not in a good way. It's going to create even more economic disparity. And I think you'll have even increased, extreme polarization between effectively wealthy, decentralized people who can live anywhere they want in the world, who are tech educated and right, and then you'll have sort of everybody else. So I do worry about the stratification getting just far worse as well as part of this. So there's definitely pros and cons, by the way, to this. So I'll pause there. I'm ranting too much. I'll let Dan weigh in here.
The only question,
I think it's interesting.
Yeah, the
Please, Dan.
question I have is, Paul, when's the book coming out? Because I will read that book.
I was about to say I'm gonna vote. I'm gonna vote for Paul when he's when he's going out there. Just to add a +1 to everything you said.
Well, I'm echoing a lot of what other people say. I know, right? This is not about me at all. This is about observing and connecting dots between movements and plotting curves over time and extrapolating forward. I'm a bit of a futurist, as you might have guessed, and so I like to sort of plot where things are going. I do a lot of reading, and I'm well connected to be lucky to be well connected to a lot of people who are really, I think, great thinkers, and so I'm just basically part of that. And I both excited about what's coming, but also worried about it as well. And so I hopefully can be some small part of a solution to for good and to make things go well as opposed to poorly. But there's some dystopian realities that are coming our way in the U.S. in particular, and particularly in large cities, that I think that people are not talking about enough. And it's going to be big. It's going to disrupt everything.
Absolutely. Let's do a quick cheer on that.
Yeah,
on the futuristic. That said, I will say, I do think we will prevail. I think what you just said
humanity will prevail. Yes.
Absolutely. Excuse my language, but not really. It is absolutely going to happen. And I think it's a very interesting topic that is not talked about enough, like you just said. So thank you for saying that.
Thank you for letting me
through. I think that doesn't happen enough. So thank you for that. Dan, I'll start with you because often it happens that I'm having a lot of fun, and this is one of them where we're getting over the time. If there is one thing that you'd like to leave the audience with, a piece of advice that to be true, something for either the technical founders and CEOs who don't always see the light earlier in their career, or to CMOs who join a company at the right time, any piece of advice that you'd like to share with them?
Yeah, I'd say, think about the long game. I think, and it kind of dovetails into everything we've been talking about, right? Is, yes, be myopically focused on what you're trying to achieve, but also open up the aperture and make sure that you're looking around you. and take the time to really look and understand and be futuristic plus in the moment, and don't take it too seriously. I mean, tomorrow's always another day, and 8 hours of sleep and a few glasses of water does everyone really good, and you come in the next day with a fresh head. So just keep at it and do it.
Well,
Paul?
Dan, that's awesome. I love what you just said. That is, it's just extremely kind of refreshing and practical to hear that, actually.
Agreed completely. Very light and needed advice. Paul, anything you want to leave the audience with? One piece of advice that you think matters the most?
Yeah, I think it's something we touched on a bit earlier, especially if someone's kind of coming up in marketing and aspiring to be a CMO at some point, or really in any kind of leadership function, in a company. I think you said it very well earlier, Gil, that and Dan too, not taking a linear path. Don't feel constrained or boxed in that I've got to just go directly up the same chain. I need to go from this marketing manager position to be a marketing director, and I need to go from director to senior director, and that's going to somehow be this linear path to CMO. Most of the successful CMOs that I know did not take that path, actually, right? They were able to actually get other related experiences, often business experience, basically managing, owning a P&L in some case, I think is very, very helpful. And getting exposure to different parts of marketing. But at the end of the day, I mean, all the stuff we're trying to do here, we're just basically trying to, solve someone's pain or enable their delight or aspiration, and find the shortest path to get that prospective customer to get excited about that or become aware of that in the sharpest, most simple way possible, right? That's really what we're trying to do here. And all of the mechanics and machinery and sort of pomp and circumstance around that thing, these should be looked at as tools that are in support of you trying to achieve that end. And I think a lot of marketers and people, especially if they're aspiring up, they think that they've got to become expert in all of the tools, or they get too caught up in like the Marcom or the tech stack, right? So they'll get too fixated on process and on the machinery of it. Sort of, there's a great quote by Seneca. I'm a big Stoic fan. Love of bustle is not industry. And I think that is so salient because people get so caught up in the work and the actions of doing these things. And well, I'm doing this, I'm using this channel now, I'm using this for this, and they miss the forest for the trees of what they're actually trying to achieve. And so I think you can take a much simpler view at where are you trying to go? What are you trying to get a customer to do? And you can get those kinds of experiences across, a range of different roles and just life experiences too, and become capable and find real world proof points where you can show that you know how to do that. And I think experiences like that and thinking like that, kind of from the outcome, from the end state of what you want the customer or person to do, is just a much simpler and kind of more empowering way to look at this. And then everything else kind of falls out of that, as opposed to the inverse, which is focus on lots of tactics and tools and your stack and following some linear path up the chain. So I'm like an extreme example of that working, but also really the best CMOs and CEOs I know also have generally taking a non-linear path like that and focus on results, focus on outcomes. So that's what I would leave people off. Feel free to take like a year off and go and explore and do different things. Do a totally disparate role in space. It's okay. There isn't some person watching you saying they're going to judge you. Like they worry about their LinkedIn. Oh my God, this gap on my LinkedIn for 6 months. Like, oh my God, what could you do in 6 months with your time and your life experience that could contribute to you being more effective in a role you take after that? It's like the dots connect, the experiences compound. So I wish people would just take a much fresher look and be less scared to take chances a bit. Again, like you both said actually multiple times during this.
Love it. Hey, don't be scared to take changes and chances, and maybe take some time off, some travel time. You said the experiences compound. I think that's an important sentence. Paul, Sorry, please.
Paul for president. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm serious.
That's
I
way
know.
too generous.
Let's start
I
with
think you're
governor
the
just to
president.
increase the chances. Let's just start with
I-
governor, and then right after the president will follow. I feel like we share some of the values.
That is
Paul,
really generous. I will run against Trump. How about that?
yeah, you do you. Paul, Dan, I really enjoyed having both of you on the
you, Miguel.
podcast.
Thank you, Dan.
You're very wise, and I enjoyed it a lot. And you're also very
Likewise.
genuine and authentic. So, thank you for sharing your life and experiences with us. It was awesome.
Thank
I
you.
think it was very, very interesting. And that's it. I wish you
Thank
a
you both.
wonderful end of your work week. Hopefully, not too much work. I know, Paul, you have a little bit of work done. Dan,
I've got
hopefully
board
not too
slides
much.
due here shortly. Yeah.
I know. Good luck with those. And hey, have a great weekend. Thank you
You
again
too. Thank you
for
both,
being a
guys.
guest.
Great seeing you both, by the way.
Thank you. Take care.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed today's discussion and will tune in again. Find all of the B2B Category Creators episodes at Metadata.io. And if you have any feedback, topics, or would like to be a guest on the show, please reach out.